The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about our banner over the front doors. And the main words, the full sentence in there, it comes from our church motto. I don't even know when this church motto first was adopted, but the church motto finishes and it says, "God is at work here, and all are welcome." And that's our hope, that's our dream. Sometimes we do okay at it, sometimes we fall short. Some of you have walked under that banner. It's been there for 2.5 years, and you've walked through there so many times that you're maybe desensitized to the words there, and maybe it doesn't register, but on there, in addition, is 3 words down below that we chose. There was a process. There were about 40 suggestions to figure out what words describe how we try to work with God and welcome people. What words? To exemplify how we welcome. So, on one side, we have no control over what God does. God works however God wants. But we have all the control in the world for how to engage in that process. We have all sorts of control over the journey. Our calling as a church, our responsibility as people of God, is to help you get to know God better and to offer some ways to follow God just a little bit deeper, one step at a time, and to express a welcoming message to the world out there. And our job here is basically, if you want a better life, come and we'll introduce you to Jesus and let the two of you figure out how to do that. But a lot of churches can say that. I mean, I'll bet you could go to any church website. Just pick a random church. Go to like Google, hit churches, 30 of them will come up, hit one of them on the website, and it'll say, all are welcome. Do you believe them all? No, I don't. I mean, I've been to some churches, and I can't tell if they misunderstand the welcome or if they misunderstand the all, but they're just not there. And we don't get it right all the time. But how we try to do that, how any church tries to be welcoming, that's the fun work. That's the faithful work. That's where things get interesting. So the 3 words we chose for how we do that, the first one was love, which in the Bible, the deepest sense of love, we said in the Hebrew Bible, it's ahava, and in the New Testament, in Greek, it's agape. And both of those hold this sense of, I know some of you are like crochet or knit, I don't know the difference, something like that. Some of you probably do quilting or sewing. Right? It's kind of like the whole world, there's this thread of love that weaves through everything. That's what agape and ahava mean. And while God's love is kind of like that blanket that just covers everything, we are at our absolute best when we're somehow connected or threading in with all of that love. When we take part in those threads, that's the best we're called to be. And what does that loving pattern look like? What does it end up developing if you're going to weave that together? Well, the second word on our banner is belonging, which is sort of an implication of the Hebrew word chesed, because compassion implies connection. And when we care about one another, when we care about our neighbors, when our love leads us to help anyone in trouble, that's more than just service. That's partnership. That's belonging. That's connection. And who belongs? Who belongs in a church like this? Presbyterians. Only Presbyterians? No, of course not. Christians? Only Christians? No, of course not. Anyone can walk through here. Only American Christians who believe the right things and marry the right people and make the right life choices and vote a certain way and hate the same people altogether? Only them in the same church? It kind of happens a lot, but no, not here. So today our third word is justice. And again, we're going to play with the Bible's own words that came way before English. English is kind of late to the game. But especially with a word like justice. Some of us have heard over and over that justice is just some new word, that it's just a slippery word that just means woke, means you're woke, which I think is a terribly uncreative way to see this old word. Justice has been such a long word that it's such a minimization to think of it as a modern idea. There's nothing modern about this. There's nothing about our current situation and our current issues that have anything to do with the foundation of justice. So today is not about the headlines, and the church is not responding to any problems or pain in the world. Our sense of how to love people that we belong to goes back thousands of years to the same history and the same prophets that Jesus grew up on. Our foundation for doing God's work doesn't come from the New York Times. It doesn't come from your new Blue Sky account. It comes from the Hebrew concept. The old one is called tzedek, T-Z-E-D-E-K, tzedek. Try that one out. Some of you probably got it. I don't know. No one knows how to pronounce these words. Yeah. So tzedek it's a noun, but it's an active noun. It kind of has in its space that we're doing things to make the world just right. And that's just right in the eyes of God, not just in our eyes, just right for everyone, not just right for some people. Tzedek is this active noun pointed toward, it's not just fixing a problem, but it's fixing the things that cause a lot of problems. It's kind of lower level, or deeper, higher, I don't know which level it is, higher, lower, but it's not just the thing right in front of you, it's the things behind the things in front of you. So if you meet a person who's experiencing homelessness on a day like this, where the winter is finally here, and they don't have a coat, you could give them a coat. That would be an action. It addresses a problem. That's great. But the Hebrew word for that is tzedakah, T-Z-A-D-A-K-A-H, something like that, if I spelled it right. Maybe there's an E in there somewhere. And that word means charity. So charity is like an addition, a different kind of thing. Some people think that the A-H on the end, that's part of God's name, and it's like a breath of compassion. That's what charity is in the Hebrew Bible, a breath of compassion to solve one problem. And it's fair to say that's great. Charity's great. Writing a check is awesome. Donations are cool. Maybe the best, in some situations, that's the best thing you can do. But the root of that, the deeper root that we're called to, not in any particular situation, but in all situations, is tzedek. And tzedek means what we can do, active, in our life and habits everywhere, to make the world the kind of place just right, where people experiencing homelessness, they shouldn't have to need coats. Or there shouldn't be people experiencing homelessness out there. Or there shouldn't be people who are without dignity and opportunity. And more than just fairness, more than just giving, what we can do, and I keep emphasizing do, because Micah, if you saw the Micah, it's do justice and love kindness, not be nice and virtue signal. Do something to make the world just right for everybody, so that we don't have to keep fixing all these wrong things for individuals in pain. Now, Martin Luther King, he jumped all over this concept of tzedek. He has a story. Some of you have heard this story. I'm going to put my own spin on it. But imagine we're at a church picnic. Let's just look forward to the summer or maybe the spring when it's cool enough that I can go outside in the oppressive heat. I'm so happy that I can be in nice cold for a while finally. But we're getting to the summer. Let's say we're getting there, and we're going to have this great picnic. We go somewhere where there's a little stream running down, green grass, kids playing. No ants on anything. It's great food. Someone brings the good potato salad with the mayonnaise, not the mustard, like the good stuff. There's just all kinds of great stuff. Everyone's wearing flip-flops like people should be wearing in church. I told some of you this week that Gerard preached a couple weeks ago after the election, and he had a line in his sermon where he said that some people, he was saying his culture, they dress up really nice and they put on their bow ties. And he says, I hear that there are white preachers out there who wear flip-flops to church. And I thought, for those of you who don't know, Gerard is the last pastor who was here before me, and so he wore bow ties, I wore flip-flops. Anyway, so you're at a place where you're comfortable with flip-flops, and all of a sudden this basket just floats down the river, and there's a baby in the basket just making the little noises that Sydney was just making, just little mewing noises. And everyone kind of panics, right? Everyone panics, and so like somebody just runs into the water and just ruins their nice shoes, and they jump in the water, they get the baby, they pull it out. Brooke probably has this beautiful picnic blanket, so she pulls that out, wraps the baby up, dries it off. Everyone's coming around. How can I help? What can I do? Everyone is so compassionate, right? Because we're compassionate people. And then someone says, we have baby formula in the raised closet, so I'm going to run over to the raised closet. I'm going to get some baby formula and some diapers because we're responsible people. That's what we do. And someone says, I'm going to call the authorities because that's really the right thing to do, to really take care. We don't know where this baby came from. Okay, we've done all the right steps. We're going to take care of this baby. But then another basket and another little comes crying down the river. And then another one, Now 3 of you have jumped in the water and you're ruining your shoes. And then a 4th and a 5th. Finally, Nancy says, why are these babies floating down the river? And so Nancy decides, I've had enough compassion, enough charity, enough responsibility. I'm going to walk up the river and find out why. Now, it takes some guts to let go of the things you have control over and to go pick a fight. It could be risky. Who knows who's out there throwing babies in the water? Who knows if Nancy needs some partnership? Nancy might need some help. She might need some people to support her. So on the way to the river, she calls a couple people in and she says, this could be a long fight. These are powerful people. We might need to advocate in partnership. We might need to have some services together to support each other and to ask God for support so that we remember that this path is not just us and babies, but it's God involved. It can be a long process. Maybe you need some fundraising. Maybe you need commitment. Maybe you need to advocate for babies' rights, not just at that stream, but everywhere. Maybe we need to pray for patience so we can really fulfill this goal. But the goal, whatever the strategies, the goal is we don't want to have babies thrown in the water. The goal we agree on is to make a world where they're safer. And we can have our picnic and they can have their safety. The goal is systematically protecting the vulnerable. Step 2, way harder, is transformationally redeeming the oppressors. Now, we are not always called to that, but that's what justice does. Protects and transforms. Now, in a world that's just right, that's what would happen. And that's the kind of world that we're called to create. Now, that's Martin Luther King's story. Going back to the Bible, this is how Jesus explained it. He used a lot of stories. Those are the fun ones, Jesus stories. But once in a while, usually he's really slippery. You ask him a question, he asks you a question, and you're like, wow, how did that work? I didn't get an answer, but I got an answer. Once in a while, he actually answers your question and says something super clear. And one time, in this instance, he gets succinct. He says, okay, here's a fundamental way that we can live as people of faith. I'm going to tell you something that's so basic, you're going to say it every week. You're going to remember this. It's going to be ingrained in you. He said, God's will be done on earth. Yeah, okay, so that's Jesus' way of tzedek, on earth as it is in heaven, just right in the eyes of God. Now, in the New Testament, he said this, I'm sure, in either Hebrew or Aramaic, but it got written down in Greek. The word is dikaios. Dikaios is a little more theoretical because Greek people are often a little more theoretical in those days. Greek culture was. But tzedek and dikaios, they agree almost completely. Make it just right on earth as it is in God's eyes in heaven. That's the goal. So in Jesus' life, how did he do that? Pick any story you want and you get an answer. How did he express the transformation for those who are both hurting and hurting people? For starters, one example is he refused to be complicit in the brokenness of a patriarchal system. He upheld women's dignity more than anyone in history that you can find in those days. He challenged toxic masculinity, which is a lesson that we can continue to hold. And he created new ways for men to be gentle and kind. Some of us, I've been reading some good books lately, and some of us, you might have noticed in Pat's prayer and in the second verse of the song, we referred to God as a mother, which some people are just still surprised by that because, Jesus said father, right? It's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. The word that he often used as father, not always, but sometimes was kind of a daddy word. And it changed this idea in those days. In many circles today, men are supposed to be tough. They're fathers. They're in charge. And so Jesus subtly says, well, you think of God as male, fine. But what if you thought of God as like a little daddy playing with their kids? So it took a step toward something more compassionate. That's what he did. And anytime we fail to honor that legacy of taking steps toward Jesus' kind of peace, anytime we just slump into the world's priority for maleness, we fail to make it on earth as it is in heaven. And that's anytime the church, big C, or this church, little c, anytime that we see women, metaphorically, floating down the river, where their rights and dignity and safety are being trampled, if we do not walk up and confront the oppressors, we have left justice on the table, and earth is just earth, not heaven. And so we try, how we try. Or Jesus was constantly breaking barriers around every kind of otherness. Those weird Samaritans, Jesus befriended. The foreigners over there, Jesus welcomed them closer to the temple. The ones who didn't have health care, Jesus said, well, let's talk, let's heal. The ones who were stigmatized and marginalized for every aspect of who they were. The divorced, the sick, those who were sexually different than the norm, all of them, Jesus brought them closer into a space of loving, not just because it's one person, because he's changing the whole world. Once, years ago, in my last church, I used to do a lot of direct homeless outreach. I don't get the opportunity to do that in this neighborhood, but in those days, we just constantly, all summer, for months, we'd have people in the office who were just in need. Sometimes you get to know the same people pretty well because they come back over and over. And our favorite couple was Cowboy and Tinkerbell. When folks live on the street, they often have a street name. So Cowboy and Tinkerbell. We made really good friends with them. It often took months until you knew that they really trusted you when they would say, well, really, my real name is David. I mean, that's a huge step for someone who's always been Cowboy to let you know into their inner person. So we made friends with them. We didn't judge them when they made terrible decisions over and over and over and over and over. We just kept trying to love them. And after a year of giving them free sandwiches and car rides down to the clinic and just listening to their crazy stories, Tinkerbell, she asked me, why do you help people like us? She said, people like us. You wonder what's in her mind about people like us. And I can almost quote my response. I said, Jesus is always helping, like this is what Jesus does. Jesus is always helping drunks and prostitutes and the poor. And so I think it's the church's job to help all these addicts and poor people that we know here. And she came back and said, you help a lot more prostitutes than you know too. Kind of scared me. I knew all the people I was working with. I just didn't know who was on what side of what game there. So now I did not know then how many prostitutes came through the door. I bet none of us know how many prostitutes come through this door. I bet none of us know how many people walk through these doors just with sexual shame and brokenness from their past. None of us know how many people walk through these doors just feeling stuck and they can't get out of these confines that the world has held them in. No one in this room knows how many people come through this door just feeling lost and so surprised that anyone cares because no one has cared for so long. But whoever comes through or wherever we go out these doors, God is at work and all are welcome. All are welcome because that's the world that God calls us to create. Now, if we make this a place where God really does work miracles in our lives, that's great. There's going to be room for people to bring in their pain and their shame. There's going to be room for people to heal and grow. There's going to be room for people to pray in all different ways and to have different ideas about who God is. There's going to be room for everyone to envision what this church should be and disagree about its involvement in different projects. That's great. We can work through that, strategize, and make it as best as we can, one little slice of heaven here on earth. But it's the love that holds us together, making us belong to one another. That's the love that calls us to make things just right, especially for those who have been most wronged. Amen.